Hey everyone. Everyone around the world is starting to wake up to the issues that they have going on around them, the food shortages, the empty shelves, but they do not understand this. Welcome back to Poplar Preparedness, folks. I'm going to walk you through something that is just crazy about food shortages and how things can escalate rapidly very quickly. We do not like to think about it this way, but this is how systems work. On this channel, we like to cover food shortages and what to do about them. And today is no different. We're going to be talking about how the food supply system could potentially collapse. And that doesn't seem like the case. We have lots of food out there growing. You pass farms that just have food as far as the eye can see. How could that possibly run out? This is a response to that. All right, so most folks like to view food and fuel as very stable systems, right? The food and fuel systems. So if you lose 10% of the fuel out there, you kind of expect to see maybe 10% higher prices. But that's not how it works, right? It's not like you lose 10% of the fuel and so therefore 10% higher prices. What happens is that price increases tend to happen in stages. They tend to step up. What happens is when the price of something goes up, let's use the example of fuel for now. When the price of fuel goes up, there's the initial sticker shock, and the price actually tends to stick. And the reason for that is people start changing their habits rapidly. In the example of fuel, there's a lot of trips that people make that just aren't necessary. Or perhaps they have two vehicles and they decide to start using the more fuel-efficient vehicle as opposed to the minivan, right? You know, I'm just going out to the store. I may have gone out to the minivan before, but no, right now I'm going to take the more fuel-efficient car because that's just smarter. Or saying, hey, there's a road trip we want to take, but prices are up. Let's not take that road trip. So people are going to start self-regulating themselves to save money, and they're going to just stop driving. Or they're going to use less fuel, buy more fuel-efficient cars. They're going to start making the easy changes for them to restrict the amount of fuel that they're consuming. That's how it works, right? The first price increase is going to reduce the demand for fuel, in this case, the most, because people are going to take all the easy options to reduce their fuel consumption, right? But the problem is that the next price hike is going to be different because there's going to be a lot less things that they can do. They've already pumped up their tires, Mr. Obama. They've already pumped up their tires to save on fuel efficiency, right? All the easy things they've already done. So when the price goes up again, it tends to just keep going up until it becomes too painful for a certain demographic of the society to even participate in. And so we've already taken that first step up with fuel, right? And we've seen that. A lot of people have started rethinking about how many trips we take, how far we drive to work, how far we drive to whatever, and just kind of cutting back a little bit. So we've been doing that already, but how much more can you cut back on your fuel consumption? Well, you've probably already cut back pretty much all that you can cut back without significantly changing your lifestyle. So when more supply goes offline, what happens next? Well, somebody's got to stop using that fuel or else we just run out of fuel. So what happens in the second stage, which is really scary, is that some people need to be priced out of the market. Some people need to be inflicted so much pain by that price that they stop using the product. If you're hearing that, you're starting to already think about what I'm about to say about food, aren't you? So fuel, we generally, how this balances itself out is as the price for fuel goes up, then the oil producers make more money, so they go out and get loans so they can drill more wells and they can increase the supply of oil, right, or fuel. But what we're seeing right now in the fuel sector is that they can't get loans because banks won't loan them money. So the supply of fuel is not increasing, even though the demand for fuel has increased, and some of the supply producers have come offline due to geopolitical events in Eastern Europe, for instance, or other places. We are seeing a decline in the amount of fuel that is coming out of the ground. And we're seeing that supply is not nearly fast enough raising to meet the demand. So this is going to actually create the opposite. It's going to create a feedback loop towards the opposite end. And once again, keep this in mind when we start talking about food. Each supply cut is going to increase the much bigger price change. So if we lose 1% of capacity of fuel, it might increase a 10% increase in price for fuel. But the next 1% might increase the price of fuel 30%. Why? Because people need to start getting priced out of the market. When you start having cuts of like 10% into the market share, prices can start doubling, tripling, until some people just can't afford fuel. So let's flip this around and start talking about food, because this is where we're really concerned about, right? You can get by without gas. Is it super inconvenient? Yes. Is riding a bicycle even possible in a lot of the suburban contexts that we're part of? It might be very difficult, okay? But it's theoretically possible. Can you survive without food? And if you're saying yes, the answer is no, okay? The answer is no. You cannot survive without food. People can't survive without food. So when prices on food increase the first step, what are people going to do? Just like fuel, we're going to try to become more efficient, right? And one of the biggest inefficiencies with food, with the food system, is meat, right? And that's why we're seeing this bickered about all over the place. We're seeing this conversation being had about meat. It takes 7 pounds of corn to produce 1 pound of beef. 6.5 pounds of corn to produce 1 pound of pork. Now, there's one meat out there that's significantly cheaper to produce and significantly more efficient, and that is chicken. 2.6 pounds of corn to produce 1 pound of chicken. But noticeably enough, which of these seems to be the most under attack right now? We have culled over 35 million chickens just in the United States, right? This most efficient protein in the diet is actually being impacted more than the price of beef and pork in some places, right? I have seen in some instances where chicken is now more expensive than beef, which is crazy when you think about it. Now, what happens then? That was step one. We become more efficient. We eat less meat. We just try to become more efficient in what we buy and such. The simple fact is, though, that there just isn't enough food. It's not like this brand is more expensive and therefore less efficient. We're buying more generics. We're buying cheaper stuff, but all that really saves is on marketing. Marketing and corporations that make a great profit off of those things, but that doesn't solve the core problem, which is that food. There's just not enough food to go around. And when we look at this, the only thing that we can really cut back on is food waste and meat. If we cut out the meat, we can then, which would you rather have right now? A pound of beef or 7 pounds of corn? Most people would, it's a toss-up. They kind of probably prefer the beef. But as prices go up and you really actually start having hunger and having trouble putting food on the table, 7 pounds of corn is going to feed you longer than that 1 pound of beef, right? And so you're going to start making choices, and that's what's happening out there right now, is that people are choosing not to buy the beef. When I was up in Maine, Dean was asking the store manager about a lot of the beef that was out there because it was starting to look kind of old, and the grocer there said that no one was buying the beef, that the previous week he had to throw out 600 pounds of beef. Now, that's just part of how the stores go and why they can't donate that. That's a corporation thing and legality and insurance and stuff like that. I don't know. But the simple fact is that people are not buying the beef at the prices that they're having. So that is causing a significant problem right there. Normally, the price of beef goes up. And so what happens? People make more beef because they can make more money doing that, right? But what's happening is the opposite. They're throwing out so much beef, they're throwing out so much meat, and this is happening to produce too. They're throwing out all this food, and so therefore they actually need to cover the damages at the middle level, and so they're paying the producers, the farmers, they're paying them less. So they're charging you, the consumer, more, and they're paying the farmers less, so the farmers don't have the incentive to crank out production in a lot of cases, right? Now, that's not a total statement. Farmers are making more money off corn and wheat and such like that, but there's this other thing going on in the center there where there's these losses, increased losses, because people just aren't buying the products, and so the products are getting tossed. Or they have to move them to a different store and get them sold just before their Best Buy date, right? So what do? Stage 1, we eat less beef, eat less meat. Stage 2, what do we do there? People getting priced out of the market. Friends, how expensive would food have to get for you to stop eating food? Exactly. Last time food prices went up like this, 2010, 2011, and we had the Arab Spring. People realistically aren't going to just stop eating of their own accord. They're going to start changing the systems of government that are causing problems for them or perceived problems for them. And that's what happens, is that you have these waves of revolutions go around the planet every time food prices go up. So as supply goes down, governments tend to go down. Prices go up, yes, and in developed countries, it's a lot of pain, but we pay for them. We pay for the food still because we need it. But places where they can't afford it, they don't just stop eating. They start revolutions. And we see this destabilizing of governments. We see this destabilizing of the world systems. And we're seeing that around the world right now. The Sri Lankan government, down in, was it Argentina? Somewhere in South America. They also, it was Peru. That was it. It was in Peru. They had food riots. And we're going to see that more and more going forward. As supply goes down, price is going to go up, but it's not because farmers just chose not to make as much food, right? To an extent, they have some choice in how many fields that they plant, and they have the choice of how much fertilizer to apply, how much irrigation to use. If they think that their crops are going to be sold for a very high level, they can increase production by using several means. But when you look at those means that they use, increased irrigation and increased fertilizer, those price inputs have gone up significantly. So the price increases we're seeing on the store shelves partially are reflecting the costs to farmers going up through the roof, but then we're also seeing bad harvests. The supply of food is down. When you look at the American stockpiles, for many of the grains, we're at 50% of the grains this year at this time than we had last year at this time. Where did all that food disappear to? We lost 50% of our stockpiles. We've sold a lot of it across the ocean. A country that has much more forward-thinking leadership than we do. We have sold out our reserves, we've sold out our insurance policy, and now we may be forced to pay the piper because when we try to buy that food back when we need it, we may not find anyone willing to sell it to us. Normally, as these prices increase, the supplies also increase, right? As the price goes up, farmers and producers can make more money, so they're going to make more, right? But we're seeing this where wasted meat, wasted produce is actually causing more costs to the system, which means farmers make less money, right? Also, the fact is that we are being impacted not just by, these aren't factories. This is droughts. These are natural phenomena happening around the world. When farmers don't have the fertilizer and they don't get the rainfall out of the sky, what can you do? We're having a large drought and heat wave over in India right now. There's a drought in China. They lost 50% of their winter wheat harvest. And we had a drought again here in the United States where we lost a significant portion of the winter wheat harvest as well. And will that impact the summer wheat harvest? Those are questions to be asked. Fertilizer down in Brazil, they're using 25% less fertilizer down there. Is that going to increase yields or is that going to decrease yields? For those of you who out there who know, something about gardening, you know that less fertilizer being applied in one of the largest agricultural countries in the world is going to result in decreased yields at a time where we need increased yields. And across the United States, we're seeing that farmers are getting their crops in significantly late. Iowa, late to get their corn in. Wisconsin, late to get their corn in. Illinois, late to get their corn in again this year. This is huge. Illinois, it's because there's too much water, and I think in Iowa and some of the other places, it's too little water. We have issues out there, and supply is down, and it's going to be a trick and a half to get the supply back up again. So the first step is going to be meat is going to have to start disappearing from people's plates. If you don't like that, you better be buying it up in cans. You better be buying it up to dehydrate it, to freeze dry it, to freeze it, right? What we're seeing is that this step one is really going to hit. It's going to hit the fan summer and fall this year. When North American meat producers, at least, they're looking at having to feed their livestock through the winter at very high corn and soy and wheat prices. A lot of them are going to choose not to do that. And when that happens, they're going to be slaughtering meat right and left. It will be a great time to stock up on meat, but realize that you may not see meat at those prices ever again. Step 2. Starvation in poorer countries. This is what we're going to be seeing late fall and spring of next year. And when we see that, people aren't going to go down quietly. They're probably going to start taking down governments. And when that happens, we're going to see a wave of uprisings and destabilizing of governments worldwide, particularly in poor countries. When we see this again, it's going to be like the Arab Spring all over again. Many friendly countries to the United States may choose to become less friendly to the United States. Just as the United States has destabilized unfriendly countries for many, many years, we may see that our adversaries may adopt the exact same strategy. And that is scary to think. So we have bird flu out there, or alleged bird flu out there, killing 35 million birds so far in the United States. Just in the last several months. We have late planting happening. We have drought out west. Folks, where is this magic food going to come from? Yes, we can save a bunch of food by not feeding it to cattle and not turning it into meat. But after that, then we just need to choose who's not going to get fed. Is it going to be you? Is it going to be your family? Any volunteers out there to stop eating? Yeah, I didn't think so. So what happens? I keep referring to this as a game of musical chairs. It's not a game at all. But when countries start realizing what's happening, they're going to start refusing to export any food products from their country. Gee, are we seeing that yet? Yes, yes, we are. We are seeing half a dozen countries already have export controls on any foodstuffs leaving their country. Folks, it's not just a game of musical chairs, but the music has stopped and some people are already sitting down. Find your chair, sit down on it fast because the chairs are disappearing and they're disappearing quickly. We sold our food stockpiles up the river and we sold American citizens out. Now, I am a proponent of free markets out there, but we have been dealing with this zombie corporate weird hybridness out there that governments are paying farmers to not grow crops. We're paying farmers to get out of farming. The 2022 harvests look like they're going to be very bad. And even then, we may see a little bump this fall as harvests come in, but those harvests are not going to take us through the entire year. When food becomes short, people are going to start trying to buy it for whatever price they can get their hands on it for. This is when markets drop dramatically, stocks, bonds, that kind of thing. There's this phrase, no bid, okay? And that is when nobody's willing to buy it at any price. So the price kind of almost technically goes to zero. You have people trying to sell it, but nobody willing to buy it. Think the inverse here. When food is something people are willing to pay anything for, but nobody is willing to sell it. What happens when most of the countries of the world put export controls on their food and a country goes out there trying to buy food and nobody's willing to sell it to them? Folks, that's already happening right now. A lot of countries are refusing to sell, and so who's still selling? Suckers. Suckers are still selling. Canada, United States, Australia, European Union, still selling food when they should realize that the free market system of the world economy has collapsed and people need to start engaging in emergency rules, and they need to be thinking differently. Nationalization. We're moving away from globalization towards nationalization. We're not one big world economy anymore. We're going to start becoming a bunch of national economies, and that's going to create significant price inefficiencies. Some countries, food will still be affordable. Some countries, it will be impossible to get. And what does that spell? Usually that spells price controls. Prices become so expensive, governments want to stay in power regardless of anything, so they start making it illegal to sell food for more expensive than X. They start saying that you can't charge more than X for this product or that product. And then farmers who are selling for less than what it costs them to produce, do they sow their fields next year? No, they don't. They're not going to put seeds in the ground that are going to cost more to grow and to harvest than they are going to be able to sell them for. Only crazy people grow under those conditions, or people who are being forced to grow under those conditions. That's how we run out of food, folks. That's step by step how we run out of food in the world, and even here in the United States. Price controls. When farmers stop growing crops because of price controls, the nation can starve. On the plus side, if you have a garden, if you have food stockpiled, you and your family don't have to. Make smart choices now. The music has stopped, but there are still chairs. Go to Walmart.com. Go to Walmart. Go to your grocery store. Go on to Amazon. Buy food. Buy seeds. Plant seeds. Grow stuff. Still get some chickens out there. Get food. Start making food, and get through this, folks. A lot of people are starting to wake up that there are problems, but you need to be moving from the problems to the solutions very quickly if you haven't already. I'm preaching to the choir here. Most of you have already moved on to the solutions. You've been stockpiling and you've been starting to think about how to produce food, or you are already producing food. Good. If you haven't started moving yet, now is the time. You still have time. Some people are saying that you're out of time, but I believe you still have some time. While there's food on the shelves, you have time to buy. Go to it. Go do it quickly, please. God bless you. I hope for the best for you guys. I hope for the best for everyone in the world. Do what you can. And we need to start growing a lot more food. And we need to push back against every price control out there, because that's what's really going to cause significant damage. Every time that there has been a great communist uprising in a country, there has been a mass famine, right? There's been a mass famine. And when these communist countries have these mass famines, it's amazing how they're still exporting food. Their people are starving by the millions, and yet they were still exporting food. The United States is still exporting food, but it doesn't mean that millions won't die in our country in the next few years. That is a possibility. That can happen. We need to make sure it doesn't happen, so take steps now. Steve Poplar, out.